Welcome back to Ignite Agility. What are we going to talk about today? Today we're going to talk about at least one accountability of a Scrum Master, maybe more as a bonus. But first, gotta get this in there or my producer will get upset. Please like and subscribe if you want to be notified when we put out new content. So Christian, one accountability of a Scrum Master. Go.
Thank you. Hi, how are you? I'm fine. Accountability. Well, the first one that pops in my head is you should be able to explain to folks or teach folks what Scrum is. And that could be people who are new to the role. It also is probably just as important, if not more important, for the people who will be supporting these folks in that role, meaning their reporting structure, who they're reporting to, so they understand what we're trying to do and why. But I've heard this. I think we talked before the podcast. We don't really know who said it, but we hear it often that good Scrum Masters should be able to explain Scrum in front of a whiteboard in 10 minutes or less.
Well, and something I heard in what you just said is the word role. So I'm going to step back there.
You got to step back.
Because the new Scrum Guide has kind of gone out of its way to describe these not as roles, but as accountabilities. And so getting that question, what is an accountability or what is one accountability of a Scrum Master, may be popping up now because the latest guide was published in November 2020. So why are they calling these accountabilities instead of role? My thought around that is, I know the why behind why they did it, and it was because organizations get hung up on titles.
Yep.
Right? So they're like, oh, well, we know who would make an effective Scrum Master, but on paper, in the HR system, their title is project manager, and we're not going to change that, and blah, blah, blah. Who cares, right? That's not what we're talking about. As long as you understand what this person is accountable for, who really cares what you call it?
Right.
My thought, though, on that is that it's a nice way to get over the waterfall hangover where we were taking roles and making them synonymous with one activity. Hey, you're an analyst, so this role has a title that only goes with one thing. Hey, you're a programmer, so this role only goes with this one thing. So it's a nice way to get over that, too, when you just think about these things as accountabilities instead of roles.
And, when we talk about what the necessary roles are in Scrum, product owner, Scrum Master, developers, I like to make sure that people understand that we don't need to hire people to fill this role as Scrum Master. The best ones tend to come from within, and adding to that the accountability, because you're right, even within the Scrum team, we say anything that's process related, we want to go to the Scrum Master. Anything that's product related, we go to the product owner. So there's two clear places for
I'm going to have
folks
you
go.
say that whole thing. I was talking about accountabilities being a nice way to get over the waterfall hangover.
Correct. And when you look at it, we used to say, here's the roles, but what we want to say now is here's the accountabilities on the Scrum team. The accountability of the product owner is stuff maximizing value on the product. The accountability of a Scrum Master is making sure these folks known as developers can come up or help improve their process. It doesn't come from the Scrum Master. They're coaching these folks, observing, and trying to help them see where they need to get better. But Scrum Masters don't necessarily define the process. It comes from within the team, working the way they work and inspecting and adapting how they work.
Well, the Scrum Masters I see who are new to this, coming out of a certified Scrum Master training or something like that, they go right to what you just described, working with the developers, thinking that that's the sole accountability of their job, and it's not. If we go back to the guide, when we talk about these accountabilities, one of the first ones it notes is the Scrum Master is responsible for establishing Scrum as described in the guide. So that might involve them teaching They might have to teach some of the stakeholders about interactions or interventions with the Scrum team that are helpful. And then, of course,
What's not helpful?
What's not helpful.
Yep.
And then the product owner on what they're accountable for. Yes, and the developers, right? So right there's quite a bit for the Scrum Master to do outside of just what they're accountable for regarding the developers.
So putting a tactical hat on, because I'm known to do that. If I'm new to Scrum and I hear you and me talking about, you and I, you and me, however you say it, what does that mean? What do I have to learn? Well, what would you tell somebody brand new to Scrum who says, I don't know what to do in this new accountability called Scrum Master? I hear what you're saying, but I don't know what I do.
Try something. It's like this, analysis.
Drop back 7 and punt.
Analysis paralysis. One of the Scrum values is courage. It's not fear. So why would we be afraid to sit down and talk to the product owner about what they're accountable for? Why would we be afraid to talk to a few key stakeholders and say, have you actually read the guide? Have you seen what the framework looks like? Do you have any questions about the framework? Hey, what surprised you about what you learned in me asking you to go off and read? There's all kinds of things the Scrum Master can do. And notice the things that I'm talking about, in no way, shape, or form did I mention a single Scrum event or activity. So all this education, establishing the effectiveness of Scrum, that's going to require a Scrum Master pulling out their people skills, their relationship building skills, their facilitation skills, and having some of those conversations.
And it is just as simple as, do you know why we are doing this? Do you know why we are trying to work a different way? That one is one I wish I would have asked folks involved on the team, but also those outside of the team, because I, just like you said earlier, fell prey to I got to coach the team. I got to coach the developers. I didn't spend a lot of time with the product owner. I didn't have the knowledge. I didn't know. I was just, we're doing Scrum. Let's go.
We're going Agile.
We're going Agile.
Just start sprinting.
So then you start to learn, and then you start to self-evaluate. Man, I didn't do what I should have done. And it's easy, and you helped me through that to say, stop.
You're welcome.
Right? I was judging my prior self before I knew something. Thank you. But you do it. People do that, and they'll come to class, and they'll be like, well, we're not doing that. We must be doing it wrong. It's not about that. It's like you say, just try something.
Well, and that's the ego inserting that word wrong, because I've never said that to a student, you're doing it all wrong. But if their own ego hears that, it's kind of
the new one I like
crazy.
It's either consistent or inconsistent with what you're trying to do. Is what we're doing going to get the results we want?
I'm gonna up that by one.
Up it.
Because you could be inconsistent at delivering crap, right? You could be real consistent at doing a whole lot of nothing.
Well, that would be a definition of consistent.
So I'm going to give you congruent.
Oh.
Because congruent is what you said you're going to do. Does the action match what you said?
Yeah. And it's just still 3 syllables, so it's really
so you can handle it.
Upping.
Okay.
It's just the same syllable.
Those are big words for him.
Consistent.
So when we talk about another accountability, so bonus, we already gave you the accountability of the, establishing Scrum as the guide, lays it out, but accountable for the team's effectiveness. So think about a coach. Like, don't even think about, Agile or Scrum, right? Because that's a whole other topic about the subversion of coaching in the Agile world. But just think about, like, I don't know, a football coach, a soccer coach, the other football, a little league coach. Coaches aren't on the field with the players. They're off to the side. They're making observations. They might ask tough questions. They may give feedback. So an accountability of a Scrum Master is they are accountable for the Scrum team's effectiveness. That doesn't mean that they're the process police.
Right.
That just means, hey, are you doing, Scrum team, what you said you were going to do? Are you congruent? See, little callback there, little congruent. Are you meeting your goals and objectives? How could you improve? So that's a whole other accountability that the Scrum Master has, is the team's effectiveness.
And coaches, you looked it up. Tom Landry is one that said a coach is the person who shows you or tells you the things that you may not want to hear about yourself, but in doing so, allows you to become better.
Yeah, a lot of people will say, oh, a friend loves you just the way you are, but a coach loves you enough not to let you stay that way. And those are all derivatives from that Tom Landry quote, right?
And growing up a Dallas Cowboy fan, I should have known that, but I didn't. So I learned something.
I told you, I just go the other way. I go all Tyler Durden from Fight Club, right? You are not a beautiful and unique snowflake.
And this is where it all falls apart, folks.
Tough love, coach. Okay, yeah, the Scrum Master is also accountable for serving the organization outside the Scrum team. And that's something I think that people just gloss completely over. So even if they haven't focused solely on developer, they understand that, oh yeah, product owner's part of the Scrum team. So yeah, I gotta handle the team with their effectiveness and all this stuff. Whoa. You're also accountable for the greater organization, serving the greater organization as it impacts the Scrum team, either positively or negatively.
Absolutely.
Because I'll hear people even in an advanced CSM, there's a learning objective around facilitation, right? And there's the participants are supposed to identify 2 times when a Scrum Master should just say no, right, to serving outside the Scrum team in a facilitative capacity. And it's crazy to me how people will go, well, I shouldn't be involved in refinement. What? That's a key opportunity for you to serve.
Yes.
The organization, the stakeholders, and the product owner. Don't you think you could help them, through that? Well, I shouldn't be involved, in refinement between the developers and the product owner. What? That that doesn't make any sense. So where we're trying to get them to go is, if there are things that impact the Scrum team, that's what we want the Scrum Master blocking and tackling on, or being a facilitator. It's more of, hey, Christian, we got to talk to you about not putting a cover sheet on your TPS report. So I'm going to need you to sit down with me as your manager, and we're going to have a little chat about that. No, Scrum Master should absolutely not be involved in those kinds of things. If it's hiring, firing, performance improvement, those personnel kinds of things, I guess I'll say. And that's really the spirit of that learning objective. Yet it's funny how people negate a lot of the things that we expect Scrum Masters to be accountable for.
And to add to that, if you think about if you're starting this journey and you're a pocket of agility or trying to start working a different way, and your company or organization has worked a different way for a long time, it's the Drucker-Cuckoo effect. It's an autoimmune response that the organization, the system, is going to react to something that's different. And that's exactly where great Scrum Masters can really impact the ability for this team to mature, is to help provide that cover, and we don't need to require everyone else in the organization to work like us to still work together if we have dependencies across the organization. And they shouldn't demand that we go back to work in the old way to work with them. That's where you can really help smooth that resistance, because I've heard it before, great Scrum Masters are felt. They're not necessarily seen all the time, because you don't need to be over people's shoulders all day long on the dev team or have the product owner be shadowed by the Scrum Master. It's that type of stuff that helps them have the space to improve, try, experiment, but also provide the air cover against the autoimmune response for a different way of work within the organization. There's a lot of syllables. Autoimmune.
That was a lot.
Autoimmune response.
The thing that I think newer Scrum Masters miss is what you just described is going to happen through one-on-one conversations. A lot of people are working virtually in distributed fashions right now. So that they might have to schedule something, right? We might have to put something on the calendar. We don't really have the drive-bys or the water cooler chats like we might have had if we're going back into an office. Now, some people are doing a few days in the office, a few days not, but a lot of that care and feeding are those subtle movements are going to happen outside the Scrum events. So sometimes people who come out of a CSM, they're just learning Scrum 101, their brain goes right to tactical, like you said before, that goes right to those mechanics in those events, and they forget all this relationship building and all this seed planning, which is going to take time. The other thing, like you said about other departments not necessarily working in an Agile or Scrum way, I tell Scrum Masters all the time, all those pretty values, openness, commitment, focus, respect, courage, they do not go out the window.
Right.
Just because you're talking to somebody using waterfall, why wouldn't we want to demonstrate respect in those conversations, openness for how we could work together? That's going to entice people. Well, hey, teach me what you're doing differently,
right. Yeah.
versus, well, this is what we're doing, and and if you're not doing it, you're not one of the cool kids. That is so not helpful, right? There's a lot of, waterfall shaming that goes on just because you're trying to interact with another department.
Not helpful.
Not helpful. So we would be remiss if we didn't talk about the fact that the Scrum Master does have accountability to the Scrum team, because that is also outlined in the Scrum Guide. The nice thing I think the guide does is it hits those other things first. It intentionally puts, the Scrum Master's accountability to the Scrum team, right? Here's the ways they serve the Scrum team. Puts those last. Puts all those other things we've been talking about first.
The creeping vine, when you were talking about those subtle things, what we used to have for water coolers or those one-offs, I can't imagine it's challenging in a virtual space, and like you say, to schedule time, whatever, but the creeping vine, small change.
Absolutely. So one accountability, I think we've given people more than one.
We over-delivered.
Accountability. That's what we like to do around here. So if you like these kinds of conversations or these little nuggets of Scrum and Agile education, don't forget to go ahead and hit subscribe. Drop us a note. Tell us about other topics you want to hear about. And who knows, maybe we'll get back in the booth and have that chat. Christian can't see what I did, Kenny.
I'm trying not to.
All right. Welcome.